This fall, bring the beauty of the Rabbit Room into your own community with House Moot. It's a self-hosted gathering where your living room, church, or backyard becomes a place for shared stories, songs, and sacred conversations. With recorded sessions, recipes, activities, discussion questions, and a gathering guide, we'll set the table for you. All you have to do is bring the guests. Get everything you need to host your own House Moot at rabbitroom.com/housemoot.
We're not at the heart of the world. It's actually God's world. We're part of his creation. We have a privileged place in it, but we are presenting what is and looking at what is in such a contemplative way that we can find meaning in it.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. Father Damian Ference is a priest of the Diocese of Cleveland. He serves at Borromeo Seminary in Wickliffe, Ohio as Director of Human Formation and Assistant Professor of Philosophy. He's also the author of Understanding the Hillbilly Thomist, The Philosophical Foundations of Flannery O'Connor's Narrative Art. In a letter to a friend, O'Connor wrote, "Everybody who reads Wise Blood thinks I'm a hillbilly nihilist, whereas I would like to create the impression that I'm a hillbilly Thomist." Father Ference argues in his book that O'Connor wasn't just making a throwaway joke, but that the philosophy and theology of Thomas Aquinas shaped O'Connor's art all the way to the ground. In this episode, Father Ference and I talk about solid, down-to-earth metaphysics, trusting the senses, showing and telling, and virtue, habit, and freedom as they apply to creative work. Father Damian Ference, I'm so glad to have you on the Habit Podcast. I really loved your book, Understanding the Hillbilly Thomist, The Philosophical Foundations of Flannery O'Connor's Narrative Art. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Jonathan. It's an honor to be on your show.
The idea of Flannery O'Connor as a hillbilly Thomist, it's one of those phrases that a lot of Flannery O'Connor fans know, but you really dig into what that really means. What did the metaphysics of Thomas Aquinas, how did it shape the way she thought about her art? So I found it really helpful. And I guess a good place to start is a phrase you use that seems kind of funny to say out loud, and that is the solid, down-to-earth realism of the classical metaphysics of being. I don't think of metaphysics as being either solid or down-to-earth, but you make the case, and of course you didn't invent this case, that the metaphysics of, say, Thomas Aquinas are very down-to-earth and very solid.
Yeah, so that's a big part of the Aristotelian Thomistic tradition. So Thomas Aquinas knew his philosophy well. He knew everyone who came before him, and he recognized what he found to be true as true, regardless of who said it. And he really liked Aristotle a lot, particularly his metaphysics. And he saw that it was able to speak into what he found in Scripture. And so he systematized very fine metaphysics there. But it was not idealistic or overly spiritual. It focused on being and beings in the world. So for Thomas, and I know we'll probably get in this a little bit down the road, but one of the important maxims here is that as human beings, we first come to know things through our senses. Yeah. And so a good example would be when my niece was young, she loved to play with my keys, my car keys, and maybe 2-3 years old, she'd take them and she'd shake them and she'd taste them, unfortunately, sometimes, and she'd throw them. She liked how they sounded, how they felt, even how they tasted, the touch of the little jagged edges. Yeah. That was not just child's play. That was learning, because we human beings learn about the world first through our senses. There's a whole way of coming to know through abstraction, and that's certainly part of knowing, but it doesn't start there. It doesn't start simply in my mind, because we're body soul creatures. Our bodies have a lot to do with the way that we come to know the world and live in the world. And so for O'Connor as a hillbilly Thomist, that was important for her, and details matter, and senses matter, and small things that maybe we don't want to pay too much attention to, they all matter.
Yeah. She she talked about the habit of art, which she didn't originate that term. I think she got it from Jacques Maritain, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. Yes.
And her definition, he said, it's not just about sort of the disciplines of sitting down and making art, but rather a way of seeing. Right? It's not even a daily discipline, but a constant, in every second of the day, kind of discipline. Whereby, let's see, I've got it. So here we go. Looking at the created world, a way of looking at the created world and of using the senses. There you go. There's your senses again.
Yep.
So as to make them find as much meaning as possible in things. And I find that so interesting and helpful. This idea that finding meaning in things is not simply a matter of skipping over to the abstract or skipping over to the spiritual, but rather using our senses to. Well, I mean, that's a surprising thing to say. Using the senses to find as much meaning as possible in things, and very much gets at what you're saying about what a hillbilly Thomist might be.
Yes. So, if you don't mind, let me say a little bit about this hillbilly Thomism, or what it means to be a hillbilly Thomist. So, when her first book came out, Wise Blood, one of the reviews claimed that this is some hillbilly nihilist who wrote this novel, and she was not offended by the hillbilly part because she's from, originally Savannah, but then Milledgeville, Georgia. She had a thick Southern drawl. Hillbilly is one who's unsophisticated. She was rather sophisticated, though, even though she didn't sound like it. But what she was offended by was the nihilistic part, because she certainly wasn't a nihilist. She didn't believe in nothing. She believed in something. She believed in God. She believed in creation. She believed that the world had meaning, and that meaning could be discovered by human beings in particular, first through the senses and then through the intellect, and that we could live according to the meaning of the world by our wills, what we choose or what we choose not to do. So a lot of that's going on there. So when she calls herself a hillbilly Thomist, she loved St. Thomas Aquinas. She claims to have read St. Thomas for 20 minutes every night before she went to bed, out of this little introduction to St. Thomas Aquinas with the foreword was by a guy named Anton Pedges. It had a lot of articles from the Summa Theologica and Summa Contra Gentiles. And so she knew her Thomism pretty well. And plus she was of devout Catholic, and Catholicism pre-Vatican Council was very much guided by the philosophy and theology of St. Thomas Aquinas, which is a metaphysical realism. Like, things matter, stuff matters. So if your listeners and viewers are not familiar with the Catholic Church, like, if you want to come into the church, we don't just say welcome. You have to have water poured on your body and the words, "I baptize you," said. Or we believe that it's not just bread and wine, but the body and blood. And when the words are said, and our churches, the architecture matters, the colors matter, the beauty matters, the music matters. So all these things, a good way of saying it for an Aristotelian or Thomist is matter matters. Yeah. Stuff matters. We're not spirits. We're not angels. Angels are pure spirit. They don't have bodies, and they know things instantaneously. We human beings have discursive knowledge, meaning that we take things in and then we have to go through a process of coming to know things. And when you mention the habit of art, it's also true that as human beings, knowing how to live, we have to develop habits to live well. So another way of saying the word habit, like the habit of art, could be the virtue of art, or her collection of letters called Habit of Being. Really what she means there is the virtue of being. You want to live, not just live, but you want to live well. You don't just want to make art, you want to make good art. And this depends upon a whole attitude, a whole way of living, where your eyes are constantly open to what she calls what is. And that means reality. So seeing reality for all that it is, in its glory and in its darkness at times. So how's that? Is that helpful?
Sure. Yeah. And that language that she uses with the habit of art, it presupposes, it presupposes that things mean things, right? That, well, as you said, matter matters. And as we receive that through the senses, there's a way to see through to something more important. More important is not the word I'm looking for. More fundamental. What's the right word I'm looking for?
More foundational.
More foundational. That's
more
good.
metaphysically prior, something like this. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was
And
thinking.
it's not discontinuous. Like the matter and the meaning behind the matter and the spirit are not discontinuous.
Yes, yes, yes. So one of a big fan of Flannery O'Connor is Bruce Springsteen, and in some ways that's how I came to know O'Connor. And he's claimed, when he was asked by the New York Times a few years ago, "What's your favorite? Who's your favorite author? What's your favorite book or most important book?" He said Flannery O'Connor, The Stories of Flannery O'Connor. And he's the same guy. Like, he's not a devout Catholic, but he was raised Catholic, so he has these sensibilities about him. And I'll never forget this one interview. No, it wasn't an interview. It was in the middle of him playing Jesus Was the Only Son off the Devils and Dust tour in 2005, 2006. And he was talking about the characters in the story. And he says, as human beings, we find our divinity in our humanity, not apart from it. That's a very Catholic, Thomistic way of thinking about the world, because it's not like when we run from our bodies and all our human experiences that we discover God and what's real and true. It's only through our humanity that we're able to enter into the world, because as human beings, that is how we interact with the world. We don't interact as non-rational animals or as angels or as God does, because we're not God, we're not angels, and we're not non-rational animals. We're rational animals. We have body and spirit, and both of those are used together to enter into reality.
By the way, speaking of Bruce Springsteen and Catholic authors, do you know about his fan letter he wrote to Walker Percy? Do you know this
Yes,
story?
I do. And then
I
it was a
figured you
double
did.
take with his it was Percy died before he got to respond, and then I think it was his nephew who interviewed Springsteen or something,
Yeah,
right?
found the letter and put it together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was so funny to me.
Can I say one more thing before I forget? Because I have so
Please.
much going on in my head. So the other thing about the habit of art, O'Connor, in order to help herself see the real world, in addition to writing, and she was a very disciplined writer, she wrote every day from 9 to noon without interruption. She also took up painting, because she said, and she says this in Mystery and Manners, I can find the quote if you need it, it's in my book too, but she says that the artist should engage in any disciplines that help him or her to see the world better.
Yeah.
So she was doing landscape portraits, and she was painting her cows, and she was painting her birds, because it was helping her see better. She wasn't a great painter, although you can go down to Milledgeville now, and her paintings are now on display as part of the centenary exhibit. But painting helped her see the world better, and therefore helped her be a better writer. And she believed in that. So most artists, if you're writers, a lot of them do paint or do some sculpting or music. They cross-train a bit to see the world better. I think that's really important, because seeing is the most important sense for Aristotle is our eyes. That's our way we enter into the world,
Yeah. Well, well, let's talk about that for a minute. This idea of trusting one's senses, of trusting the fact that reality is accessible to us, because it's true enough that our senses can be deceiving.
Yes.
And when I took a psychology class in college, we spent a lot of time talking about optical illusions and all the ways that the senses,
Right.
they were trying to demonstrate that maybe we over trust our senses. But I have to say, the fact that our senses give us any access to reality is pretty amazing to me.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the hillbilly Thomism, that it's like a common sense approach to the world, that you trust what your senses are giving you. And if something's off, we don't do the Cartesian move of saying, well, I must doubt all my senses and these can't be right, and I have to start abstractly or idealistically with reason alone. Like, that's not the move that the Thomist takes. And that Cartesian move is a response to Descartes. But no one lives that way.
Yeah.
No one lives doubting their senses all the time or pretending they don't give us access to the world. A good example would be this, that a couple of years ago, I was actually teaching an epistemology course, or a section on epistemology, to my seminarians, and the chapel was being redone at the seminary, and we watched this big truck pull in, and we saw it lift what we thought was the altar up through the old stained glass window that was carved out. And I thought that was pretty cool. And then lo and behold, as they were doing a little more work, I realized it wasn't an altar. It was big sheets of drywall that were together in a stack.
Okay.
So at first, my senses told me that's the new altar going into the chapel. But upon further reflection, I realized what I thought I saw, I actually didn't see. I saw this instead. So how did I come to do that? Upon further reflection, with the data, the information that my senses presented to me. So I don't outright deny my senses. My senses are so important in coming to know the world.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've never known anybody who doubted their senses so much they wouldn't duck if a baseball was
Yes, yeah.
They'd either catch the ball or duck, but they wouldn't say, I don't know, I really doubt my senses here.
Yeah, and I know that Descartes, his was a hyperbolic doubt. It was exaggerated just to get him to do this new kind of philosophy that had mathematical and scientific precision. The problem is, especially for O'Connor, that philosophy and theology isn't necessarily about mathematical or scientific precision, because the knowledge of reality is even deeper than that. And there's always an element of mystery to it that you don't solve, because it's that mystery that's solving you.
Yeah.
And so for O'Connor, that's God. I mean, you it's the transcendent, it's the great beyond. Like you get, her stories throw you off balance intentionally, and that's why she uses violence to shake you up, to wake you up. But it's not to destroy you; it's to destroy your ego and your wounded self, so that you can experience healing and see the world in a better and more clear way.
Yeah. Father Ference, can we talk about what all this has to do with the principle of showing and telling?
Oh yeah, sure. So for O'Connor, the way that you invite your reader in and the way you tell good stories is not by telling them what you want them to think or just giving reports of action. You actually want to show them what's happening so that they can see it in their own imagination and in their own mind's eye. So the way that she would describe someone's hair as if it was like gravy running down his forehead, or someone's bloodshot eyes as red nets over their eyes, or she has such attention to detail. And the detail's important because the smallest things matter, and the smallest things tend to reveal big things. Yeah. So we don't just say, "Oh, well, don't give me that. That's too that language is too flowery, or that language is too descriptive." No. The more you are able to describe the particular, the better you're able to grasp the universal.
Well, and you're talking about language being too flowery or too descriptive. There is such thing as language that's too flowery or too descriptive because it takes us away from the reality.
That's right.
Depicting the concrete reality that's in front of us.
I wonder why we call it flowery, by the way. Because O'Connor certainly doesn't use flowery language. She is like skeleton, morbid, shocking language.
Yeah.
But so there's certainly a way where you can get saccharine or too sentimental. But I think it's more about the particularity of language that's speaking to a specific thing. And so specific things matter. As we said before, matter. So you want to present it in such a way and speak of it in such a way to honor what is there. And in doing so, you're inviting your reader or your listener to encounter the thing through your presentation of the thing.
Yeah, which is the way we experience the world in the world God made, right?
Yes.
Through the senses. The stimuli come in through the senses, and then we decide what to do with them. We have feelings, or we reach conclusions, or
we make a judgment on what we saw or that's right.
Yeah. And so I think that is at the heart of really what showing and telling is about. It's presenting the world the way it comes to us, because I don't have a narrator walking around with me telling me what to think about any given situation. Right. I reach some judgments pretty quickly. O'Connor, I'm misquoting her, but she said something to the effect of the eye is an organ of judgment. That we go so quickly from what we see to what we judge about what we see. and she had this incredible trust that. Well, she really had a trust in her own ability to depict in such a way that the reader would know what to do, would know what judgments to arrive at.
Yeah, even if it takes a little while in reading O'Connor's fiction, because I've run across enough people who will say, "I don't like it. It's violent. I don't understand it. What's she trying to do there?" And I say, "Well, that's why I wrote my book, to help you understand how she writes." But she does intend to throw us off balance and to clear our vision, and sometimes to clear our to improve the way we see the world. She needs to shake us up a little bit in order to do that. And so that's why she says she draws these large, startling figures,
Yeah. You've already touched on Descartes, and I'd like to talk just a minute. You draw a distinction in your book between thinking and knowing.
Yes.
Right? That Descartes was super interested in thinking, I think, therefore I am.
Yes.
And Aquinas and Aristotle before him was talking about knowing. And tell me about the distinction between thinking and knowing.
Yeah, so we've covered it already without mentioning it, that human beings, because we're not simply minds or consciousness or spirit, but because we are body, soul persons, that we come to know the world as one with a body and also a soul, unlike an angel. So for Descartes, if you recall what he does in his method, the first thing he does is he clears the decks. He doubts everything that he's known before. So he doubts mathematics. He doubts his own memory. He doubts his senses. He doubts everything. And he just wants to clear the decks to get to a point where he can know something for sure. And the first thing that he comes to know is that he's thinking. And then out of thinking, he comes to know God. And then out of that, he moves out to knowing true and false, another proof for God. And then eventually in Meditation 6, he comes to know the external world. But so he's starting out just as a thinking thing. But Aristotle and Thomas would say, no. You, before you can say, I think, therefore I am, you actually would first have to say, I am, I exist, and then I think, because existence precedes everything. You can't talk about something unless it first exists. So I exist as a human being who comes to know the world, not just by thinking about it, but I actually come to know the world. I take in the world. I take part of the world into me. That's what my intellect is able to do through my senses. So it's a much deeper, robust sense of knowing than just having scientific or mathematical knowledge about things. And it's not to diminish scientific or mathematical truth, but it is to say that there are deeper truths upon which scientific and mathematical truths are based, and that is the truth of being itself.
Yeah. I've wondered, I don't know my Descartes all that well, but I've wondered why he didn't start with, I have consciousness, rather than I think.
I think his way of saying I have consciousness eventually, it might be the same sort of thing. I don't know. I have to go back and think about that. Off the top of my head, I can't give you a good answer to that.
Yeah.
But I mean, in some ways, after Descartes, like the Cartesian inheritance moved toward that kind of talking about consciousness. And that's what it really means to be a human, is to be conscious. And this is why when we get into the discussions of AI, having conversations about, can AI ever have consciousness? Could AI ever have real intelligence? Or would it always have to be artificial because it's not a living thing,
So can AI ever have consciousness?
I don't think so. I wrote a paper when I was in graduate studies in Rome about can you befriend AI? And my answer was no. One, because it's not living, and two, because it's not natural. It's an artifact. And there are certain things you have to be able to do with friends. One has to be a reciprocity, and that it would come naturally for a friend to not just imitate because it's been programmed to do this, but like willingly want to reciprocate your friendship. And also, in order to have a friend, you have to be able to, according to Aristotle, you have to be able to dine with a friend and eat with a friend. And artificial intelligence doesn't need to eat food. And so food is an important part of being a human being too. So Anyway, that was a little tangential, but
Yeah, no.
you asked.
I asked. It was my doing, Jess. Okay. Human beings, according to Aquinas and according to not just Aquinas, always in pursuit of the good, whether they know it
Yeah.
or not.
Yep.
Also, human beings not very good at knowing what the good is
Yes.
or how to get it, whether they know what it is or not.
Yep.
This seems really relevant for storytellers, and I'm broaching the topic. I'd love to hear your thoughts on. That wasn't a question. Sorry.
No, it is a question. So it's Aristotle 101. Pick up a copy of the Nicomachean Ethics, and it's the very first line. It's like every art, every inquiry, every activity is in pursuit of some good, but it's some good or an apparent good.
Mm-hmm.
But Aristotle makes a distinction between apparent goods and genuine goods. So as human beings, we are teleological. We are geared toward good, some sort of good. So when I teach my seminarians, I can ask them like, why did you come to class today? And then they could go through because I have to. Why did you have to? But it's always, you think there's some good happening. But even the worst criminal, like someone who rapes or murders or is a terrorist, they did that because they thought some good would come out of it, whether it was the pleasure of overpowering someone or the pleasure of killing someone, or you thought it was good for some political reasons to blow something up. We're always drawn to some good. So we never act because we think something's bad. This is the problem with the vicious person. The vicious person thinks the bad is good. So Aristotle does this great thing in Nicomachean Ethics, Book 7, and I cover this in my book, where he talks about there are 4 basic character types of human beings. There's the virtuous, the continent, incontinent, and then the vicious. The virtuous person desires to do good, like the good, and thinks that he should knows what the good is, desires it, and does it. The incontinent person knows what's good, doesn't really desire it, like I kind of want to go get drunk, but I know I shouldn't, and then doesn't. And then that's a continent person. The incontinent person wants to get drunk, knows he shouldn't, but gets drunk anyway. And then the vicious person thinks, I want to get drunk. Getting drunk is good, and I'm going to get drunk. So most people are between continent and incontinent, and that's what makes stories so interesting, because a lot of times we may know what the good is, but boy, is it hard to do it, even if we know it, because for most of us, we desire to do something besides what's good.
Yeah. Just yesterday, I was talking to Heidi White has a book coming out called The Divided Soul. It's about the conflict between desire and duty, and that all stories end up, living somewhere, in that conflict between desire and duty, because all of our lives are lived in that conflict between desire and duty, and that ultimately desire and duty will be reunited, but since the fall, they've been split.
Yeah.
Which is, again, sort of those two categories seem to live mostly in it between the continent and the incontinent.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And then for the truly virtuous person, desire and duty would be more aligned with one another, I guess.
Yeah. But it's only the truly virtuous, like almost every human being that's ever lived on the face of the earth has at one point struggled with incontinence to some degree. So when you're building virtue, you're building second nature. And I do use this example of athletics in my book, of like a LeBron James, when it comes to playing basketball, and I speak of him because I'm from Cleveland, but this guy does not need to think about how to pass, how to dribble, how to shoot, how to play defense. He's worked so hard at his craft of basketball that he is a virtuous basketball player. And someone like Flannery O'Connor would be a virtuous writer. She wasn't always, and it took habits to build second natures to get to a point where you're that way. But The same that as we can talk about in sports or athletics is also true with human living and morality, that in order to get to the point where we are living virtuously and freely and actually finding it a joy to obey the commandments and follow God's precepts, that takes a lot of time, and we would also say a lot of grace to get there. And most of us are either continent or incontinent there. We're trying really hard, but man, we fail a lot too, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've spoken of virtue both in terms of our moral living, our lives, but also in athletics. Do you stand by that use of virtue? You said LeBron James is a virtuous basketball player.
Yes.
Is that language that is you mean that literally? That's language that is rigorous?
Yes. And I would make this distinction. So you can be virtuous at a particular craft. And O'Connor actually says this too. Like when she talks about the Catholic novelist in Mystery and Manners, she says the Catholic novelist doesn't even have to be Catholic, but unfortunately he does have to be a novelist.
Yeah.
So you can be a really great artist or a really great athlete or a really great actor. So you can be virtuous at that. And a simple definition of virtue is an acquired habit of excellence at something, right? But that doesn't make you a virtuous human being.
Yeah.
So you may have a particular craft. You're an athlete, you're a musician, you're an artist, and you're excellent at doing that. But you're not a very good human being. Now, I also think what O'Connor was trying to do, and have you seen the movie Wildcat with Ethan Hawke? I think what he's trying to show there is that O'Connor is both trying to be a virtuous writer, a great writer, and a great human being, like and I would mean by that a great Catholic at the same time. So she's trying to be holy and she's trying to be a great writer, and it's hard to be both of those things at the same time. We don't have, in our Catholic tradition anyway, many accounts of artists who are saints. I can think Fra Angelico is beatified, but Caravaggio killed a guy. He was not a virtuous man morally, but he was certainly a virtuous artist.
Yeah.
And there's the distinction. So you have like the ontological good, like being good as a human being, or the being good or virtuous in a particular craft, you know. It's a little, that's the distinction, I think.
Mm-hmm. Can you speak to freedom with respect to virtue?
Yeah, certainly. So according to the Aristotelian Thomistic tradition, you gain your freedom and you become free by being who you are supposed to be, by being virtuous. So in other words, there's a notion of freedom that's pretty modern or postmodern that thinks that I get to decide what I want to do and how I want to write and how I want to play or how I want to live my life. And in doing that, I am free. That's abhorrent to the Hillbilly Thomist. That's abhorrent to Christianity and the Aristotelian Thomistic tradition, because in the Aristotelian Thomistic tradition, we find our freedom by figuring out what the rules are and then playing that game well according to those rules. And once we get really good, virtuous, we don't even think about the rules anymore. Yeah. So a good example would be you're learning a new language. And when you first have to learn the verbs like to be and are, you know, whatever language you're learning, it's hard. And you're learning the grammar and you're like, I hate this. Or you're learning to read music and you're like, this is so difficult. But once you get all those rules down, or you're LeBron James learning how to dribble, shoot, pass, play defense. Once you get to the point in your life where you're so good, you don't even need to read the music anymore, or reading music is just like, oh, this is so pleasurable to me. That's when you've achieved true freedom. So the virtuous man or woman, is the one who's living according to the rules of the game in such a way where they're not bound by them, but they're actually set free by them. So that's what a good writer or a good human being looks like. So, we would say in Catholicism, that's what a saint looks like. They're so good at being human that they're like they're free. They're truly free to live
Yeah.
and to flourish.
Yeah.
They're flourishing. Yeah.
The train doesn't gain its freedom by jumping the track.
True. Yes.
Uh,
And in fact, like you hear this example all the time too. For a body of water to really have power, it needs these boundaries, restrictions, not to keep it from being free, but to give it power to hone all that energy and focus it in a particular direction. Yeah.
Yeah, and O'Connor talks about the idea that you can choose what you want to write about, but you don't get to choose what you're able to make live.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the positive way of saying that is once you know what you can make live, do that.
Yes. And you don't make up reality. What you're doing is you're seeing reality and you're presenting it. You're making good art according to right reason. Yeah, that's it.
You at one point you talk about the idea that imagination and reason are divorced in contemporary art thinking. Could you say a little more about that? I mean, what you mean when you say that reason and imagination are separated from one another?
Well, yeah, I think it goes back to the conversation we just had that somehow the one who is truly free is the one who can, create out of nothing and make things according to his or her own image and reality, rather than the Thomistic perspective or O'Connor's perspective is there's already a given. There's already a reality that's there, and we don't have to necessarily create things anew. But what we're doing is we're discovering what is already baked in to reality and highlighting it or presenting it in such a way where it can be understood or seen in such a way that it affects us, or taking a spotlight and shining it on certain truths, like where Jesus talks about being salt, light, and leaven. In some ways the artist is doing that, because although Thomas doesn't even like us to use the words creating. He likes to say we're making, because only God creates, and creation means out of nothing according to the Thomistic tradition. But yeah, we're not at the heart of the world. It's actually God's world. We're part of his creation. We have a privileged place in it, but we are presenting what is and looking at what is in such a contemplative way that we can find meaning in it.
Yeah.
Is that helpful?
Yeah. And Thomas, if I'm not, I may be slightly misquoting him, but I think I've got this about right. Reason is an openness to reality.
Yes, I suppose that's, I don't know if he'd say exactly that, but maybe.
Okay.
That is true, because what we're doing is he does talk about this, like our minds, how does he say it? It's called adequation, that our minds are aligning with what is real. Mm-hmm. So that we're able, and he actually thinks we're able to take that in. It becomes part of our soul. What is out in the world becomes part of who we are. And we take it into ourselves. So hold on, I'm thinking of the exact Thomistic definition. It's our minds adequated to reality. That's actually the definition of truth.
Adequated. ADEQUATED.
Yeah, to adequate. Yeah, to adequate. Yeah, our minds are adequated to reality, and that's his definition of truth. That we know truth when our minds line up with what is. Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Yeah.
And so the idea of reintegrating imagination and reason, is a function of connecting the imaginative life with reality and openness to reality, or something along those lines.
Yeah, and so the way that the Thomistic business works, in our imagination, we still are working with phantasms or images, and it's not until we bump up even to a higher realm of knowing that we're able to abstract and have like conceptual knowledge of things. Mm-hmm. But according to Thomas, you can't have conceptual knowledge unless you first have an image of something. So we human beings think with images. It's hard, like it's impossible not to have some sort of image to base our knowledge off, unless you have some sort of infused knowledge, which Augustine's big in that. But for the most part, the way that we come to know things, this goes all the way back, it's a comeback now to our first part of the conversation, that we first know through our senses. So we take in the world through our senses, then we have a phantasm, and then we work from that to have like abstract conceptual knowledge of things. But we don't have our initial way of knowing the world is not simply abstract. I mean, and I cover that in my book when I talk about abstracting, but not abstractions. Yeah, because there's always some concrete, incarnate reality that we come to know.
Yeah, which is so important for people who write fiction, but also important for people who write persuasive, like who traffic in ideas more directly. It's still helpful to remember that we access ideas by way of the senses.
Yes. There's a reason as Alistair McIntyre would say, we are storytelling animals. We love stories. We love images. We love diagrams. The more that you can engage the imagination as a writer, the better off you are.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's wrap this thing up. I feel like we could talk all day, but I want to hear from you. Who are the writers that make you want to write?
Well, Flannery O'Connor makes me want to write. And in fact, when I was writing my dissertation, I copied her orarium. So every day from 9 to 12. I did take off Sundays. I wasn't dying from lupus. She was. So I give her that. Recently, I've been getting into the Russian novelists. And I read Anna Karenina for the first time last year. I think that was the best novel that I've ever read in my entire life. And
so you read Dostoevsky and say, I want to go do something like that. I want to go write. That makes me want to write.
What it makes me do is want to write about, like, he gets into the heads and the hearts of characters in a way that most authors aren't able to do. And I love that because he took you through, well, he was thinking this, but he actually said that. And I think the psychological complexity that he was able to present in that book in particular was wonderful. I enjoy that very much.
Yeah.
In terms of poetry, I like Anne Sexton a lot. I like the confessional poets. I like Sylvia Plath a lot too. I also, I've not tried to write a short story yet, but I certainly would like to. I've written poetry. Mostly my stuff is I'm an essayist and I do a lot of reviews of things. But John Kennedy Toole, who wrote Confederacy of Dunces, he makes me want to write. And the other one I should say is St. Paul. He makes me want to write letters, and I write a lot of letters. I believe in old school correspondence with stamps. I make a lot of visits, probably 3 or 4 visits to the post office every week. And I write a lot of letters to my friends, and I have nice stationery, and I like good stamps. And so St. Paul reminds me how important it is to write letters, because no one does that anymore, and they go a long way.
Yeah, they really do. All right, Father Damian Ference, thank you so much for being here. This has been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's been an honor to be on your show. I love it.
Well, thanks. The Habit Podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. You can support their work, including this podcast, by becoming a member. Visit rabbitroom.com/membership. Special thanks as well to Taylor Leonard for letting us use her song Diamonds as the theme music for the Habit Podcast. You can learn more about Taylor and follow her work at taylorleonard.com. The Habit membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.